The radicals on the left are the problem, and they're vicious, and they're horrible, and they're politically savvy.
The next time any of your MAGA friends or family say, oh, the left's rhetoric is the problem, show them that fucking clip. Now, I'm not saying the left doesn't have rhetoric problems from time to time, but I am saying this one thing. None of them are the President of the United States calling people that he governs vicious and horrible. Sounds like dangerous rhetoric to me, but the fuck do I know, right? And the reason people on the right don't give a shit that Trump says stuff like that is because they agree with him. They nod along and go, yeah, they are vicious and horrible. He's right. And this is directly because the Trump administration and the right-wing media ecosystem has successfully created a narrative that liberals are dangerous people who hate America, which couldn't be further from the truth, but that is the truth they live in. That's their reality. So that's why they look at Trump saying that shit and go, yeah, that's right. So in reality, we're not the problem. But in their reality, we're very much the problem. So we just got to wait till their reality crumbles around them and pick up the pieces and rebuild America ourselves.
Wow, you guys, sometimes the corruption is so staggeringly in plain sight that you just can't believe that they'll actually do it. But they do. The Trump administration just announced that the IRS is going to halt a crackdown on major tax shelters for the richest people in America. I'm just going to read you straight from the New York Times article because this is so bonkers. The Trump administration is quietly dismantling efforts by the IRS to shut down a slew of aggressive tax shelters used by America's biggest multinational companies and wealthiest people. Trump administration bowing to pressure from industry groups, right-wing activists, and congressional Republicans is quickly rolling back several IRS law enforcement efforts, including one aimed at a lucrative tax shelter used by companies like Occidental Petroleum and AT&T. How much more blatant do you need it to be, America? This IRS crackdown was projected to raise more than $100 billion over 10 years. Oh, but we have to cut FEMA because we have to cut waste. $100 billion they could have brought in, but no. Occidental Petroleum needed that money. Let's be clear about this. They are actively rescinding a Biden administration rule that did exactly the opposite. President Biden was trying to bring more money from rich people into the IRS to fund programs for working class Americans. Brought in $1.3 billion just in 2024. They were making progress, taxing the richest people in the country. But we can't have nice things because people decided to vote for Donald Trump or stay home or vote third party. And now we have this. Read the entire New York Times article. It's not just one thing they're rescinding. They're getting rid of every single way that we have been coming after the wealthiest and the biggest corporations so that they get to keep all of their money. Because never forget, Donald Trump is abusing his power to benefit himself and his rich and powerful friends at the expense of working families, period, full stop. And if you needed more proof, here you go.
Quick question for Donald Trump and Nancy Mace. What exactly does shoe leather taste like? I only ask because they were so quick to condemn Democrats and point fingers at the left and call the left radicals after the incident with Charlie Kirk. We all saw the Oval Office address from Donald Trump where he blamed the left for the hateful rhetoric, and we saw Nancy Mace come out of Congress and she said, quote, Democrats own this. And we saw this morning when Donald Trump was on Fox and Friends and called Democrats and people on the left radicals and vicious. So I'll ask again, how does the shoe leather taste? Because no one bothered to talk to the family before going on the internet and making themselves look like a silly goose. The Daily Beast is reporting this. Although MAGA figureheads have been quick to point fingers at the left for Kirk's death, Tyler's grandmother, Debbie Robinson, 69, insisted that they came from a family of Trump supporters. She spoke with the Daily Mail on Friday after news of Robinson's arrest broke. Quote, my son, his dad, is a Republican for Trump, Debbie told the outlet. Most of my family members are Republican. I don't know any single one who's a Democrat. The truth is, the more we learn about this suspect and his family, the more it seems they fit the mold of a typical conservative MAGA family rather than a liberal Democrat one. There are many pictures with various family members holding pew-pews at celebrations and milestones like birthdays. There are Halloween pictures where Donald Trump is depicted as a Halloween costume. These are not the hallmarks of a typical liberal progressive Democrat family, in my opinion. So, while Nancy Mace and Donald Trump are busy taking their respective foots out of their respective mouths, I, for one, will be busy trying to find my surprised face, so that I may look shocked at this brand new revelation. Maybe I should get some pearls to clutch. What do you think?
Well, there's a lot of misinformation about Charlie Kirk's alleged shooter, Tyler Robinson, going around. Here's what we do know, and I'm going to tell you why I think the harmful, dangerous rhetoric from the right about us leftist loonies is going to come down several notches, okay? Tyler Robinson comes from a traditional Christian white family. And I say Christian because the father invited their minister over to talk with Tyler Robinson with what's being reported. Talk to him about turning himself in. Christian white family. When you go through the Facebook photos that are being published, clean cut white family with all the family professional photography with them sitting out in the trees, beautiful scenery, you name it. Already debunking the image that's painted of us leftist loonies by Donald Trump and Fox News. Furthermore, the father was in law enforcement. Not within that vision of leftist loony family. And we don't even know that they're on the left because Tyler, and I want everybody to get this, is a registered voter, registered as a non-affiliated voter. This sort of third-party, independent, non-affiliated voting base is now going to be one of the largest by midterm elections. More than registered Republicans, more than registered Democrats. And in this pool of voters, you've got everything. Left-leaning, right-leaning, third-party-leaning, independent voters. He wasn't a registered Democrat from what's being reported on reliable news sources. That's what I want everybody to keep in mind. The President of the United States already began painting all of the leftists as violent, as loony. Fox News called for retaliation against the left, but this is a white family with a father in law enforcement, and they were Christians. That's what I want the takeaway to be, in addition to the shooter not being a registered Democrat.
So click through on that comment. I recorded a video last night. I think I titled it on the screen, "This Was Never Supposed to Happen." And I expanded on that a little bit at the end of another video this morning, but it was at the end of the video, so I'm sure nobody saw that because it was at the end of the video. I think what has been so rattling and unmooring for MAGA and for the right with regard to the killing, the assassination of Charlie Kirk, is that, yeah, this was political violence. This country has a very, very long history of political violence going back 400 years. Political violence is what built this country. But it's usually perpetrated by the right. The right is not typically on the receiving end of political violence. Certainly not like this. I mean, this was a sniper shot assassination. And, you know, if you believe the right, you know, nobody on the left owns guns and nobody on the left knows how to use guns. And I mean, again, it's like, I'm not trying to make light of this killing of Charlie Kirk, but when you think politically motivated gun violence in the United States, you think of the right, period. I mean, they have fetishized their guns and they have fetishized the Second Amendment to such a degree that there are a lot of the kind of Second Amendment crowd on the right, you know, with "We the People" tattooed on their forearms, they have made their guns and gun rights and fighting against tyranny their entire identity. And for the right to be on the receiving end of this particular kind of political violence is extremely atypical. And that because guns are their calling card. Guns are their identity. You know, not the left. And I think that this just really completely shook the foundations of so many people on the right, because, and plus it's like they've been demonizing the left ever since this shot was fired. The shooter's a 22-year-old straight cisgendered white man from Utah, a state that Donald Trump won 3 times. He was raised by conservative Mormon parents, Trump voters. He did not have blue hair. He did not have a septum ring. I've not seen tattoos on him. I have not seen a photo of him with painted fingernails or wearing a dress or wearing jewelry. He was not trans. I've seen no indication that he's a member of the LGBTQ community at all. I mean, he was one of their own. He was one of their own. So it's like, on the one hand, it's just so remarkably typical that the shooter turned out to be a 22-year-old straight white guy, because that's what these kinds of shooters are. They're just young white guys, over and over and over and over and over again. Just like the school shooter in Colorado that happened shortly after Charlie Kirk was shot. 2 kids are still in critical condition, and that shooter's dead. It's like on the one hand, it's just so completely typical who the shooter turned out to be. But in political terms, for people on the right, it has completely wrecked their foundations entirely. Because the right is not usually on the receiving end of this kind of political violence. The right is usually the perpetrators of this kind of political violence. And it's making their brains glitch.
So hi, I haven't spoken about the Charlie Kirk murder until now because we didn't know anything. And since my channel was created not to report the news but to make sense of it, I felt like the only responsible thing to do was to wait until there was more information. It now appears that the person who shot and killed right-wing political commentator Charlie Kirk was like the majority of shooters in America, a young white male from a conservative pro-gun religious background. After being told for 2 straight days that the left had declared war on America, that the shooter was most likely trans, or in Congresswoman Nancy Mace's words, pro-tranny, after the Wall Street Journal published an article they had to later walk back that the bullets had a pro-trans message because it turned out to be just the markings of one of the world's biggest ammunition factories, they were wrong. We still don't know the motivation for the killing, but we will find out more in the coming days. But here's what I'd like to do. I'd like to put it in context, because I think the biggest takeaways we have right now are the following. We have a gun problem in America. People who are unhappy have easy access to high-powered firearms to take their unhappiness out on others. The 2 children who were shot in school the same day Kirk died were shot by a 16-year-old who had been radicalized online by white supremacist groups and had easy access to a handgun. After years of being told by our own law enforcement, including the FBI, that the majority of domestic terrorism is perpetrated by white extremist groups who are the greatest threat to our national security, we have done absolutely nothing but allow those groups to flourish and grow. Charlie Kirk himself was one of the people who grew that movement. You only need to talk to the black women and minority groups and marginalized groups or immigrants he personally targeted to get a first-hand account. Or look back on any of his speeches or comments or debates to see that white Christian misogynistic narrative that he was preaching. Now, that does not mean that Charlie Kirk deserved to be shot. No one deserves to die in such a violent way. But we should question why this one death resonated so strongly with the same people who know school children die in the same horrific way every day but don't care. I want you to take what happened to Charlie Kirk and imagine that as a 6-year-old boy in class, or a 70-year-old grandmother at the grocery store, or a mother of 4 at Walmart. What is the difference? Is it that you saw it happen? That he felt like one of yours? That the event was so visceral and vicious that it shook you up? I understand that. But then let's take that as a lesson. That this kind of violence should be unacceptable to our country, and we should be doing everything we can to stop it. And speaking of stopping it, everyone from our president to members of Congress to media outlets and personalities chose to blame this event without evidence on their political opposition. Not just for one person's actions, but for violence and radicalization in general. It should feel ludicrous to blame one half of the country for a single person's actions. Not only that, but to demonize the political party who has done everything they can for decades to limit gun violence. The party who begged you to care about your fellow Americans being slaughtered at the movies or in churches or concerts or schools, but were met with nothing but thoughts and prayers and AR-15 lapel pins. How is it possible that the party of common sense gun legislation and the Office of Gun Violence Prevention could be the party being blamed for someone getting shot? And if we're talking about political violence, then we need to remind people that historically, it is the left who are the targets of political violence. It is the people who seek equality and change and justice and fairness who are most often assassinated. Everyone from Lincoln to JFK, RFK, MLK, Malcolm X. Gabby Gifford was shot in the head on stage. Minnesota Representative Melissa Hortman was executed with her husband and dog in their home this summer. And she was only one of 70 people on a list of Democratic lawmakers targeted for death. So I refuse to sit here while the Democrats and left are painted as the party of war. The Republican president himself just changed the name of the Department of Defense to the Department of War and threatened to invade Chicago. It was right-wing agitators who stormed the U.S. Capitol looking for lawmakers to kidnap and kill. It is the right wing who spent the past 2 days creating a false narrative, blaming an entire group of people for a violent execution with no evidence. The right wing who is using another American family's tragedy with gun violence as an excuse to start a war they already wanted to start. So unlike everyone on the right who tried to capitalize on Kirk's death to spin some narrative to their own benefit, and everyone on the left who felt the need to lionize the man for free speech who did more damage with that speech in his lifetime than most people could ever dream of, I'm just going to stick with the facts. And the facts are this country has been deliberately divided and set on each other to the benefit of a small group of people in power, and we keep helping them. We are fighting each other when we should be putting all of our attention on them. The people crashing our economy and taking our healthcare and bankrupting our farms. The day Charlie Kirk died, the Republicans in the Senate voted not to release the Epstein files, something Kirk himself had called for them to do. But so many people don't even know that happened because their news and social media feeds were filled with a call to bring war and death to the Democrats. Sometimes things aren't as complicated as they seem. Ask yourself who benefits most from something and then see who tries to capitalize on it. The Democrats didn't do this terrible thing, but an entire political party and industry went into overdrive trying to make you think they did. Why? And what did we miss while we were dealing with that?
Well, everybody else is talking about that other story, you know, that Trump-la-fuck on Trump-la-fuck crime. There are some other things we need to talk about. The most important thing has to do with the Epstein files. We didn't forget about that, did we? I know the Republicans want us to, but we didn't forget about it. There were 16,000 emails from Jeffrey Epstein's account released. There's a lot of things to be gained from those emails. We'll wait and see what specifics we get, but here's what we know. Ghislaine Maxwell was suggesting she wasn't involved in anything with Jeffrey Epstein. These emails suggest otherwise. And in these emails, Ghislaine Maxwell and Jeffrey Epstein spent a lot of time talking about Trump. They haven't specified as to what they were talking about, but the whole concept that Donald Trump barely knew Jeffrey Epstein and wasn't his friend is kind of bullshit. He wrote that page in the birthday book, the one he said didn't exist, and now all of a sudden it exists. Now these email files, this is how it's going to go. If they don't release all the evidence, there's going to be things slipping out here and there. And every time it comes out, it's going to put Donald Trump closer with Jeffrey Epstein. You Republicans can say whatever you want. Donald Trump can say whatever you want. But Jeffrey Epstein and Donald Trump were best friends for maybe 10 years. They had similar interest, money and young girls. So naturally, they would get to be close. And day after day, we will get things that come out that put them closer. And then when that happens, I'm curious how the Republicans will react. They were all about it when they thought it was a Democratic cabal, but when you find out your Lord and Savior and some of these other Republican fucks are involved, are you going to be okay with it now? I would hope not. But honestly, I don't know how you motherfuckers think. You're going off half-cocked all the time, telling us a libtard shot Charlie Kirk, and then we find out that wasn't the case, and now you're just real quiet. You're not big on being wrong, but I tell you what, Trumplefucks, you were wrong yesterday about the Charlie Kirk situation. You're wrong about the Epstein situation. I would be getting tired of being wrong all the fucking time.
I find this all suspicious. I got to be honest with you. I just finished watching the press conference in which they announced that the killer, the assassin of Charlie Kirk, is a 22-year-old white male from Utah named Tyler Robinson. He's a college student. Now, some things, I mean, up until this press conference, it's just all been suspicious. I mean, they've put out so much misinformation, and here I'm talking about law enforcement. The FBI, it's been a clown show. And that's not surprising that it's a clown show because, you know, Trump and Kash Patel got rid of all the serious people. Yeah, they fired them all. They fired all the career professionals and replaced them with, you know, Trump loyalists and unqualified, you know, MAGAs. So that's who's running the investigation, at least on the FBI side of things. As to the Utah law enforcement, I don't know anything about them, but, you know, Utah, bunch of Trump humpers out there. Anyway, so much of what they said in this press conference, it didn't feel to me like they were giving us information. I know some of these people say, oh, I'm surprised at how much specific information they gave us. Yeah, they gave us some specific information, which in itself, to me, is highly suspicious. But they really didn't say very much at all. They told us how the father turned him in because this kid had implied that he was responsible or directly said he was responsible. They didn't give specifics about that. They didn't give specifics about what was said there. But the first thing they did, the governor of Utah walks out and says, we got him. And then all of the people who spoke, most of the press conference was just them patting themselves on the back. That's what most of it was. Most of it was not providing us any information. It was just to pat themselves on the back. You know, Kash Patel going on and on and on about, you know, this is what a real law enforcement operation looks like, or some shit like that. Just saying how wonderful.
So let me just see if I've got this straight. Nancy Mace yesterday, without knowing anything about the shooter, claimed that he was a quote-unquote tranny. She advocated for the death penalty. She was very incensed, full of rage, and said that the left owns this. She was very forceful, and, you know, wasn't just her, it was a lot of MAGA Republicans. But today, we know more information. The shooter was identified, or the suspect was identified as 22-year-old Tyler Robinson, who is a cisgendered, heterosexual, white man who is from a conservative family, a gun-loving conservative family, was raised around guns, but looks like his whole life. And now that she is in possession of those facts, Nancy has changed her tune. Now all of a sudden she is saying that he is a lost individual and we should pray that he finds Jesus. So I just find it very interesting that yesterday, when she thought the shooter was trans, she was very, very angry, calling for the death penalty. And now that he's a cis white guy, likely conservative, or at least from a conservative family, we should be a little more understanding and pray for him because he's just a lost soul. And look, I get it. You know, a lot of people, especially conservatives, were and still are very, very upset and saddened by Charlie Kirk's death, and they were angry and they wanted answers. But just rushing to judgment and scapegoating the usual people that you spend your entire political careers demonizing and marginalizing isn't helping anyone. In fact, it's harming those communities, which is what Charlie Kirk did for a living. But that's certainly not going to help Charlie Kirk's family, and it's not going to bring
his killer to justice any quicker by just spreading misinformation and dangerous lies about people just because you hate trans people. I'm sure Nancy Mace will apologize for this because she's just such an upstanding person, but I won't hold my breath.
I got one question. When is Maxwell going back to maximum security? It seems that Bloomberg, the news media outlet, has got their hands on 1,800 emails from old, what we call them, let's say, Epstein and Maxie from back in the day when, right before he went to prison, I think some after he went to prison. Yeah, they got their hands on those emails. And according to the recording they released of the transcript between Maxwell and Trump's defense attorney, who's now second in charge of the DOJ, she said that she had nothing really to do with any of the business, that she was just kind of a victim or just kind of there. But she said she wasn't an active participant in it. And she said that was her testimony. And wasn't that kind of tied to her being removed from the maximum security prison? Well, the emails say different. The emails differ. She says they weren't, I think in the transcript she said they weren't even really that close. Oh, but the email said they were looking into fertility treatments so she could get pregnant by Epstein. Yeah. She's lying again. There are so much evidence in these 1,800 emails. Spreadsheet of extravagant gifts given by Epstein to people and the victims. Yeah. And a lot of the emails, they are collaborating a lot of the victims' testimony about Maxwell. When's she going back to prison? The real prison. Because she lied. The emails is showing all kind of transactions that she was handling while Epstein was away. Yeah. So it blows that I really wasn't involved. I really didn't have much. No, baby. We got it in writing. So when is she going back to maximum security? I just want to know, because you really, it was breaking all the rules and the standards or requirements to even be transported from a maximum to minimum. So she didn't even meet the credentials to be there in the beginning because of the amount of time she had and because of the crime she was sentenced for. She was never supposed to be there anyway. But now that you know that she is still lying in direct testimony that she gave to you, which her lawyer came out on CNN and said he would never take his client before anyone to talk anything unless there was something in there for his client. So of course they got a quick pro quo when she did the interview with Trump's defense attorney and got that minimum security prison. Yeah, that was a quick pro quo. He said it on CNN. So now it's being brought out again that she's still lying. Habitual liar. The papers say different. The paper trails say different. The emails say different. The emails say what was actually going on. Even an email between her and Epstein that said that we're talking or discussing how they were going to discredit any woman coming out against them, or a woman that was coming out against them. Yeah, they discussed how they were going to discredit her, the woman that didn't have much to do with it, right? The one that was kind of a victim herself. Yeah. What victim tries to go get fertility treatment to have her predator's baby? Make it make sense? Make it make sense! So, I'm sure you guys are wondering too, but when's she going back to jail? She's still lying. She had perjury charges when she was on trial. So she's a known habitual liar. Now the emails back it up. She's lying again. When is she going back to the real prison? Or is she going back to the real prison? Or is she going to keep her mouth shut on certain things to keep covering for a certain person, to keep her in that cushy prison? Cover up all the way up to the top, right? It's only one person able to do the things that's been done for that woman. Goes all the way up to the top. So my bid is she's never going back to maximum security, despite what these emails bring out to the public. Yeah, she's never going back to the maximum. And she's getting work release too. They approved it. Yeah. So she's going to be out and about in the world, scouting prospects for her famous comeback when she's eventually let go altogether. You know, she's getting ready to do her recruiting. And which it was said in those emails, she was one of the best recruiters ever. Ever. Yeah. She ain't going back to that maximum prison, is she, y'all? We know she's not going. I smell a stench to the high heavens. Anyway, guys, I just popped in to bring out that little tidbit. Y'all know what I know, you know. Y'all know we in this together. Y'all have a good one. I'll holler at you later.